Excellent. Well, I guess we should probably kick this off now. To start off, why don't you just tell me who you are and actually how you started into this subject of homelessness and hobos.
My name is Todd DiPastino, and I'm the author of Citizen Hobo, How a Century of Homelessness Shaped America. And I got into the subject as a graduate student. I found a ragged old copy of a dime novel. Dime novels were, in the late 19th century, dime novels were kind of a combination of reality TV and soap opera. They took stories from the newspapers and dramatized them and serialized them, and working class, poor urban readers just ate them up every week. They couldn't wait for the next installment to come out. And where I went to graduate school in the library, they had rows and rows of these things that nobody had touched for literally probably 100 years. And I took a few off the shelves and started reading them and became absorbed in them because they really give a great sense of the daily life of people living in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s. Teddy Roosevelt said that he got his whole vision of what America was like from reading dime novels. And I noticed in the dime novels that every other one was about a tramp who is really a descendant of George Washington, or a tramp who's really a millionaire, and you kind of find out in the last installment, a tramp who appears to be down and out and ne'er-do-well, and he turns out to be a hero who saves the young lady and saves the day. And tramps were everywhere in these stories, and they were all young white men, these characters. And I began to wonder, what is a tramp? I was living in New Haven, Connecticut, and most of the homeless people that I saw on the street weren't young white men. And I really became curious, whatever happened to, where did these tramps come from, and where did they go to, and how did we get to our current situation? And that one thing led to another, and over 10 years I learned a lot about homelessness and its history. For there to be a well-developed concept of homelessness, for there to be a recognized problem of homelessness, there needs to be a very well-defined and peculiar sense of home. It should go without saying. And the modern sense of home didn't really develop until the 1500s or 1600s. So there were always poor people around. There were always impoverished peasants. There were always people wandering the countryside and living on the streets of big cities. But they weren't yet considered homeless because there really wasn't a sense of exclusive private property. There really wasn't a sense of the nuclear family. And there was a sense of that people belonged to a larger village or community. So in a feudal kind of system like there was in most of Europe, really until the 1700s, 1800s, in a feudal system, there really isn't any notion of homelessness. People belong, there's a sense of masterlessness. You belong to your lord, you belong to your village, you belong to your extended network. But there isn't a sense that you belong to a nuclear family in a particular homestead. So we first get what might be called a problem of homelessness in the 1500s in England especially, with the crisis of what was called vagabonds or vagrancy. And those two words come from the Latin vagare, meaning to wander. And that was really the crisis. These people kind of wandering, not being tied to the land anymore. And this is at a time when peasants are being evicted from their land. And that term migrates over to America, to the colonies, and people who wander are considered vagrants, and mainly they're warned out of small towns. Who were vagrants? Vagrants were a kind of slice of American colonial life. There were many children who were vagrants, older women who had no means of subsistence, young men who weren't employed as apprentices, and older men who were too old to work and too young to die. And most of the time, vagrants would be taken in if somebody in the town or village knew them or had some connection to them. They would be assigned to another household and they would live in that household. If there was no connection, if a vagrant was truly a stranger, they would be warned out, warned to keep away from the town and pushed on to the next town. But what we know of as tramps really didn't develop until after the Civil War. The fear about them is they might bring foreign heretical influence into the town. They might be witches and warlocks. That was a very real fear. These strangers might literally be the devil kind of walking into your town and wreaking havoc. This was a big common fear in New England during the 1600s. So there was the tramp, when the tramp phenomenon, when the explosion of the tramp population occurred in the 1870s, Americans kind of were already prepared to be frightened of these new vagrants.
I ride on the queen of them all. I'm on my way, I'm going this way on that streamlined cannonball. She moves along like a cannonball, like a star in its heavenly flight. And lonesome sounds from the whistle I heard as she travels through the night. Smile on the engineer's face, contented he waits for his call. Though he's old and he's gray, still he waits for his day on that streamlined cannonball. She moves along like a cannonball, like a star in its heavenly flight. Lonesome sounds from the whistle I heard as she travels through the night. The headlight beams into the night, and the firebox flash you can see. I ride them blinds, it's the life that I love. The Lord, it's home, sweet home to me. She moves along like a cannonball, like a star in its heavenly flight. That lonesome sounds from the whistle I love as she travels through the night. Travels through the night. Travels through the night.
I went to Dunsmuir, California to visit Lord Hard USA, who was also a hobo king, in 1992. And we had gone down to the hobo jungle, and we ran into a couple of hobos down there that were waiting to catch a train going north. And while waiting on their train, we drank a few beers, got a little tipsy, I got lost. Roadhard says, well, I'm going to go get some more beer, and then I'm heading on home. I says, I'll follow right behind you. So I find a bush, take care of my business, and I make my way up the hill, and now I'm lost. I lost my sense of direction to get to his house. And instead of getting on a city street, I ended up on the interstate. and I'm walking without knowing I was on the interstate. There was so little traffic, and out of the clear blue, a car sideswiped me. There were no headlights, no nothing. And fortunately, they stopped. They just sideswiped me, I dropped. And it broke my left leg. On my right leg, I had a cage, because I just had a fusion done on my right leg. And there I was, laying on the side of the road. And fortunately, like I said, they stopped, and they had a cell phone call for an ambulance, and of course, the highway patrol came. They get me to the hospital, and here comes this highway patrolman. He had just given the driver a warning about not having his headlights on, came to the hospital and gave me a ticket for $54 for walking on a freeway. And I had to pay that ticket or go to jail. So I didn't have very good experiences in Dunsmuir, California, or with the California Highway Patrol.
Do you ever get lonely out on the road or on the rail?
Oh, heavens no. How can you get lonely out here? We got people like you coming up and talking to us all the time. Take up more of our time than we are making money. No, we don't get lonely. And there's enough women out there riding the rails. You have companionship, believe me.
So is there more women riding the rails now than...
A lot more now than there was 10 years ago. Now you got families riding the rail with their little kids because they can't get no work nowhere. All our work is going overseas. I just read in the paper the other day where Ford just closed 10 of their plants. That put 5,000 people out of work. Well, guess how many of those 5,000, give them a month, will be out on the rails? Because they ain't going to have no place to go. They can't pay their rent, they can't pay their mortgage, can't buy food, they're out. So there's getting to be a lot more of us. You go down to Davenport. Matter of fact, in the paper the other day, it showed where there was 5,000 homeless in Davenport. That's a lot of people. And Davenport ain't that big. But between there and Rock Island, which is across the river, there's 5,000 homeless. The shelter only holds 200 and some. What do the others do? They camp out like I do. Plus, it's nicer being camped out anyhow. If I don't like the company, I can get up and move. If you're in a shelter, you can't do that.
I had been in Boston and had a seizure there while I was having dinner at a shelter, at a homeless shelter. By the way, I've never considered myself homeless. I do utilize the shelters if I don't have food of my own, and until I get a day's work. I do utilize those places to get a shower or to get a meal. Once in a great while. It's not my favorite place to go. But in the process of having a seizure and being taken to the hospital, my wallet slipped out of my pants and somebody stole my identification. And back then there was no photo ID on the Massachusetts state ID, and this person had been wandering around the country on a Greyhound bus and died. So they called my family and notified them that they had found me dead on the Greyhound bus. Could they come and identify this body? Well, this is all unbeknownst to me. All I knew was I had lost my wallet. I thought the ambulance crew had stolen it, to be honest with you. And and so the word got out from my family to the hobo community that I was dead. And that was before they went to claim the body, which wasn't me. And then they never notified them that it wasn't me. So here, all my hobo friends gathered together and have a memorial service and a funeral for me. They're all partying. And Adman actually said while they were partying, wouldn't it be just like Frog to walk in here right now? Lo and behold, a month later, I called one of my hobo friends because I was going into their town and I was wanting a place to crash for the night. You're dead. What do you mean I'm dead? Your family called us and told us you're dead. Who in my family? I'm not dead. I'm talking to you right now. You know? We had the biggest laugh about it, but it wasn't anything to laugh about because there I was. I'd been trying to gather up new identification. I don't know if you've ever lost identification, but it's an SOB to get new ID. You have to start all over from scratch, from birth certificate, and then maybe with the birth certificate you might be able to get your Social Security card if you're in a small town office where they don't require 2, 3, 4 pieces of identification to get a Social Security card, a replacement card. And then there's a matter of getting a new state ID. I don't drive, so needless to say, I'm not going for a driver's license. My driver is the railroad, whatever railroad I happen to be riding on. I've had very good chauffeurs over the years, over my 31 years out on tracks. And, but it's been a standing joke amongst the hobo community that they actually wrote a song about me. There's a popular folk singer from Hinesburg, Vermont. His name is Rick Pagliari. He wrote a song about me catching the westbound. I wish I knew all the words. I would sing. I would love to sing the chorus to you because all I remember of it is gathering around the jungle fire and passing the jug around. And it was a celebration of my life, and I'm glad that that's what they did. I'm glad I'm not dead, and I'm able to celebrate my own life with my brothers and sisters here at birthday.
I lived my whole life as a hobo. My only home is this old train. Been a frog and a king, Lord, I've done everything. Now I'm riding on the westbound. Let the jungle fires burn wild and free. Pass my bottle around. Let the train whistle blow. Tell all the old bows I'm riding on the westbound. I slept in every old boxcar. I rode down every railroad line, but I don't have to boast. I rode coast to coast. Now I'm riding on the westbound. Let the jungle fires burn wild and free. Pass my bottle around. Let the train whistle blow. Tell all the old bows I'm riding on the westbound. Light a candle in the back of a boxcar and gather my friends around. Let the old banjo ring while the hobos all sing. I'm riding on the westbound. Let the jungle fires burn wild and free and pass my bottle around. Let the train whistle blow. Tell all the old bows I'm riding on the westbound. Lay me down on a blanket of cardboard. Use my bindle to pillow my head. And when my body's gone, my spirit moves right on, riding on the westbound. Let the jungle fires burn wild and free and pass my bottle around. Let the train whistle blow. Tell all the old bows I'm riding on the westbound. Yeah, I'm riding on the westbound. I'm riding on the westbound.
Oh, hang on. Bring it up.
This way?
There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
Aaron, you can hand that out.
My name is Slim Tim.
Okay, you can hand me the.
Okay.
We'll get that out of the way.
My name is Slim Tim, and this part of the Hobo Museum is my family. My dad was a hobo for close to 45 years, and he rode for years and years on the railroad. He's been from Maine to all around, and always thought that he was a bum. I found out when my sister connected Shorty, I believe she hitched up with my dad in Virginia, where she can give you some more information down the road, and found out she came here to Britt and found out that my dad was a hobo, and found out the people that were here they enjoyed the freedom of being on the road. Me as being a youngster at that time, I met him maybe when I was 7, met him again when I was 12, and we never really chit-chatted with each other. When he was 21 years old, he came in where I was working. He said, "You know who I am?" I says, "Yeah, you're my dad." I sat down with him, and he said he had no disrespect for his family or anything else like that, but he just didn't like, he could see us. He saw us once in a while, and he'd be across the street, but he wouldn't come over and talk to us because he felt bad about what he was doing. But he said we always had a place in his heart.
The homeless do really fall into a couple groups. That the homelessness, even the term homelessness in many ways, is not really a useful one, because the homeless are so diverse. They come from so many different backgrounds. Their problems and goals and ideas about life are so different that it really can't encompass everyone. I mean, you know, there are homeless people who work full-time as waitresses at restaurants, who are living out of vans or cars. And then there are people who don't hold down jobs at all, and sleep outside most of the time in urban neighborhoods. And these are very different kinds of people in many ways. And what many ethnographers or anthropologists have found in studying street homelessness, especially those who kind of are the most visible, who are seen by urban residents or commuters downtown, found that the street homeless tend to be much more politicized than the invisible homeless. They tend to be much more aware, I think, of to lack of a better term, their own oppression, and they seem to be much more self-consciously rejecting a system that has rejected them. Many of the men and women who live on the streets do so because they're unwilling to enter family units to get housing. They're unwilling to make nuclear families in order to get first dibs on housing that's available to poor people. And because they're unwilling to do that, they find themselves on the streets, stigmatized as street people. But it's a bargain that is worth it for them, because families, to them, in most cases, or in many cases, are harmful environments. I mean, these are often people who have been raped as children in nuclear families. They've been abused as children. They've been neglected or otherwise damaged by nuclear families. So they want no part of it. These are people who, because of the traumas they have suffered, were never able to get the kinds of skill requirements for good-paying jobs. They know that there's no hope for them ever to have a job that pays well enough for them to have stable housing. So they've kind of accommodated themselves in many ways to the streets, to a homeless life. And that is really a counterculture. I mean, that is the essence of a counterculture. And I think some anthropologists and ethnographers who've done work in the past 5 or 10 years have found very high levels of alienation and disaffection among street homeless people with the mainstream society. Having said that, there are many Americans today, single Americans today. I think a huge, unprecedented proportion of Americans now are living in single unit households where they're the only people in the household, are living singly. They're also just as disaffected, I think, with nuclear family ideology as some of these homelessness people are, but they're not paying for their rebellion with homelessness.
A tramp usually don't go far, and he wants a handout. A hobo will get out there and bust his ass for a living, but he's free to ride and go where he wants. That's the difference. That's like home guards. Like Tom down here under the bridge, he's a home guard. He's been here for 40 years. Born here, bred here, and gonna die here. He's always saying how he's gonna go here and go there, but he never goes. When I say I'm going, I'm gone.
Well, it's been said many times. There's sort of a little ditty about it. They say that a hobo is someone who travels to work, and that a tramp is a person who travels to not work, and a bum is someone who doesn't travel or work. He just like drinks and uses drugs and stuff like that. I guess that's kind of true. I've known a lot of people who work steadily who were heavy drinkers, and I've known some people who didn't do a darn thing except sit around who were actually fairly intellectual. So I'm not sure that it's a valid statement, but it's a standard one. I mean, that's what everybody says.
Now, when Roosevelt was in and they started the TVA projects, everybody left home to go travel to where the TVA dams were to build them. My grandfather went 100, 200 miles away from the house to help build Wilson Dam down in Alabama. That's where you had to go where the work was. You know, the times were hard. One of my grandfathers had the only white shirt. You know, when they had a funeral, people would come borrow his white shirt because he was the only one around that had one. But again, back to the farm. If a farmer needed hoers and he only had 5 hoes, he could only hire 5 people. But if you had your own hoe, he could hire 6 or 7 or 8, however many he needed for that day. So it was to your advantage to have a hoe and to travel and be available for day labor.
And then you were known as a hoe boy. So the story goes. And a lot of this predates all 3 of us.
Yes.
I spent a good part of my life trying to track down the origins of the term hobo, and I think I've read every single theory out there, whether it be derived from the term hoboy, like young men who carried hoes with them to do some farming or agricultural labor, or hoboy, meaning ho, meaning high boy, that they used to call out to each other. My favorite, personal favorite, I don't believe any of these theories. My personal favorite is the phrase used by one of my favorite hobos named William Aspinwall, who spent years writing letters to a social scientist explaining his life, and he wrote mainly in the 1890s, and he called himself a hobo, Hautbeau, meaning a beau, beautiful man, and ho meaning high, kind of like a playboy or a high liver or something like that. He thought of himself in kind of French romantic terms, as a gentleman of the road. None of these has the ring of authenticity to me, and the only thing that I do know about the term hobo is that it did derive from the West, and that it was used for the first time in print in 1883 in a newspaper in the Pacific Northwest. I believe the newspaper was from Yakima, Washington. So hobo was a term that was in circulation by the early 1880s. And hobo seemed to be a term that was being used to designate a distinction between the tramps of the East and the rail riders of the West. Hobo eventually evolved into a term to denote a wanderer who rode the rails from job to job. Hobo eventually became a kind of badge of distinction. To call yourself a hobo meant that you weren't a tramp and you weren't a bum. And there were lots of different variations on that theme, but maybe the most common was the idea that the hobo works and wanders, the tramp drinks and wanders, and the bum just drinks. That was, of course, a hobo who is making creating this hierarchy. But hobo subculture really did develop in a distinct way, apart from the earlier patterns of tramping that had characterized the East, and hobos developed really their own distinct subculture that was centered around cities and around the dispersed work sites of the West, whether they be mines, agricultural fields, railroad or construction building.
The 3 different kinds of hobo postcards, I think.
Okay. Back in the early 1900s, they had actual postcard companies that sold postcards to the general public. And of course, they only cost a penny to mail, but they were cartoons regarding hobos and riding the rails. And there was several different types of, I've even learned recently, even some of the postcards were even on leather, as well as the cardboard. So this was the true postcard like we have today, only back in the early 1905, 1908, and so forth in that time. Then, the hobos back then, they couldn't afford to buy one of these postcards. So they would dumpster dive, and they would find cardboard. And on one side, we'll use like maybe an old cereal box, and there'd be something like the Breakfast of Champions way back when or whatever, but something that had a picture on it. And then they would cut out the size of a postcard, and on the other side it would either be gray or white, and they would make their own postcard, and they would send that a lot of times to their family, letting their families know where they were and that they were okay. So that was a true hobo postcard when they dumpster dive. Today we have hobos, like we have two of our kings, Liberty Justice and Iron Horse Brad, our current king, and they make postcards, and their postcards are very artistic. And like one of the recent ones they did, Liberty Justice, he had a picture of two hobos that he drew on a card, and he had them in a field similar like how they used to do migrate work, only they were doing garden work in today's world. And the one hobo looked at the other one and he says, "What are you planting?" And he says, "I'm planting birdseed." And the guy says, "Why are you planting birdseeds?" And he says, "I hope they hurry up and grow so I can have a good dinner." So they come out with their own hobo postcards today, and they're mailing them around mostly to hobos and stuff, and they're all different. They come. It's really a contest now between the two hobos who can come up with the funniest postcards and send them. So I always say there's 3 different types of hobo postcards. Some of them, especially way back during the Depression, their artistic work was out of this world because maybe that's all they had to, as a hobby or something to do when they were in the jungle, was to make something. And a lot of the hobos in their artistic work, they used to take just the knife and they would carve things. And there's one particular hobo called the Whittler, and he lives up in Wisconsin area, and he used to just make things with his knife and whittle, and all this stuff is now in a museum. And it's worth a lot of money. And so when you travel or you see things, people now are going into attics and they're bringing things back from a great-grandmother so-and-so and stuff. And this is when they're finding the hobo coins, certain hobo tramp art that they have. They used to make crosses out of wood, just anything and everything that was available. And then you have your musicians that were so good, and they would come up with their own songs. And they had a talent playing a certain instrument, whether it was a harmonica or whatever they had available, and guitar. And a lot of them would stand on the corners, and again, that would be a way that they would make money, was using their talents, either by what they made in artwork of hobo tramp, or by like the hobo nickels or whatever. If they'd either barter or sell them, or else they'd sing. And they'd have a cup out, and that would be some way that they weren't beggars. They were doing something to get money for to eat and things like that. Well, the general public didn't understand what the signs were, and so this was all the hobos had this sort of language of their own, and they would make a sign. And like if they would come near a farmhouse by railroad tracks and they were hungry, and if a hobo was treated well by a kind lady, so they would maybe draw like a cat, and what that meant was a kind-hearted lady. And if you go there, that person would probably give you a sack lunch or give you something. And most of the hobos would go there and they'd do a chore to get this in return, or a piece of pie or whatever. They also had signs of danger. If there was a policeman there that would arrest them, or if it was a bad area to catch out, it was bad, or they'd have signs, "This is a good area," or they'd have signs, and the sign would be like an X with 2 little dots on the side, and it'd be almost like looking at the end of a picnic table, and that would mean that's a good place to have a jungle, or there's water available. So they would take their knife and carve in these signs around wood trees, railroad posts, wherever they could that would be near that area. So people didn't realize when they used to have a lot of hobos visit them, they didn't understand why, but their house was marked. And so that was one way. And it was a language all on their own that all the hobos understood.
Kind of connected with that, since you work a lot out on the street. I mean, you see the graffiti of street gangs. I mean, how do you see a correlation between those kind of things?
I don't understand the street gangs, but again, each one of those signs means something to them. And so it's when their artistic work on some of this graffiti that they put on the walls and things, it amazes me, one thing, how they do it and no one catches them, because it's large amounts of it. It's not just a little bit. And everything that they draw or put on this graffiti for the sign of the gangs, it has its own meaning, just like the hobos had their signs in their day. Now the hobos today, a lot of them use what I call message board. And they don't have the signs like they used to, but they'll leave each other a message. They might be under a concrete bridge, and they'll take something like a felt pen or something, and a permanent felt pen, and they'll write something like hobo so-and-so was here on 3/12, and then it might have Idaho. And that means if someone's wanting to know where they're going, or that they were here in the Kansas City area on 3/12/06, and they're headed to this area. And so if they want to catch up with them, then they know where they'll be. And that person will stay over in that area maybe for a short time till the other person catches up with them. So I call it a message board, and I see a lot of that. The hobos today are more high-tech, and they've learned how to use a computer. And so when they're traveling and to contact different friends or people or family, they can go into a library and they email. And so it's quite different than the old postcards, and because they can get an answer just right away, or they could send something right away to let people know. So I call it high-tech hoboing by using the libraries. Sometimes they might stop and say, a friend, once in a while when a few hobos come into town, I'll go down to the yards or the areas where they're at and pick them up and bring them out here. And of course then they sometimes use my computer and we'll send out messages. Most of the time, whenever they can get around a computer, that's their thing. They want to really get on it and check their emails that they've got, because maybe they haven't been able to check them for quite a while. So it's interesting what they do in the libraries.
I grew up where my mother would take me across the street. Because my dad worked in, per se, the bad neighborhood where all the homeless people were and the bums. And I had a little bit of that growing up. But when I went to high school, I actually had, one of my English teachers was an ex-hippie, long hair, and he would put on clothes without holes, but they were older. And one day we were actually in the store, and very well-read teacher, and I really liked him. One day we were in my dad's store and we were shopping, and he was in his hippie attire. And I'm going to go over there and say hi. My mom pulls me away. No! We don't talk to those people. I says, but Mom, that's my English teacher. Gave my mom an extra shot at that, although she was very cool because she worked in a roadside restaurant where back in the 60s it was the Hells Angels hangout, and they would come through, and they ended up with getting to know my mom. She got to know them, and they respected each other. So she was pretty cool to some extent. And then, but I've always been, per se, the citizen, the middle class America. But I've come out here, and there's so much heart, and that you just gotta educate people. And sometimes it's just one at a time.
In 1995, I was waiting on a train in Castleton, North Dakota, and I was laid out in a field waiting on my train, trying to stay hid from the general public. 5 kids came walking up the tracks, and teenagers. They were carrying baseball bats and mitts. I assumed they had just finished a ball game, so I paid no mind. I rolled over, and next thing I know, I was bopped on the backside of the head 3 times, and that's all I remember until I come to, and I have no idea how long I was out. When I come to, the bones were sticking out of my pant leg, so obviously my leg was broken. My boot was removed from my shoe. My foot was broken as well. And so I was transported on a gurney, on a track inspector's truck, because there were no access roads for the police and the ambulance to come to me. And so it happened on Burlington Northern property. And the only thing Burlington Northern did was have me sign a waiver saying that I would not sue them. Well, I would not have sued them. I was trespassing. These kids were never found. They were never apprehended. The police first tried to say that it was a transient beating. Then they later changed their story to say that I had fallen off a slow-moving train. However, the media had already caught it on tape from the ambulance crew that I was beaten, and it was aired on public television in Fargo, North Dakota, so that police no longer could deny it. After 11 unsuccessful surgeries over a 9.5-year span, my leg had deteriorated to the point where they had to amputate. I continued to ride from 1995 until 2001 with a great deal of effort. And as Tim told you in his interview, we as a hobo community are a family. And I've had people carry not only my backpack and my sleeping bag and my water jug and my food bag, but myself on their shoulders and get me on a train so I could get from point A to point B.
So do you have disabled Social Security then?
I currently receive Social Security disability. Fortunately, I had worked enough and paid enough into my Social Security benefits so that I could draw my benefits. And 2.5 years ago, the leg had degenerated to the point where I had opted to have the leg amputated. However, our beloved Social Security system would not allow it to happen because it was not clinically dead enough. I waited to the point where I wanted to amputate my own leg. I waited for another year before it had degenerated enough. And when it had, of course, I was in such excruciating pain, they had to put me on methadone for pain medication. And then automatically people thought I had been a drug addict, and I'd never done drugs in my life.
So the Social Security office wasn't going to pay you unless it was 90-some%?
They were not going to amputate my leg. They were not going to pay for my surgery unless it was 95% clinically dead. And so I had to suffer for an extra 14 months because of our wonderful system.
I met Steam Train Murray Graham while playing at the Kansas State Federal Penitentiary to entertain the inmates, convicts. A friend of mine asked me to go up there, and Steam Train Murray was there entertaining. He played a juice harp and told a lot of hobo stories. And he, when he was elected king, well, he was elected king 5 different occasions, and he said he promised that he would go around to institutions, hospitals, and prisons, anywhere to entertain people, and he kept that promise. Well, we really took a liking to one another on the show, and he invited me to the Hobo Convention in the following August, and I went up there and found a way of life that I really fell in love with. And, you know, I enjoyed the people. Some of the old bridgers, some of the old hobos that rode the steam era, you know, that, and still some of them still riding in the modern era, you know, and so it just seemed to, maybe it was my genes in my blood. My dad hoboed, I found out later in life, the dad, and but I remember when I was a young boy on the farm, one time an old hobo come up in the Rock Island tracks, and my dad told me, I was afraid of him. Dad told me that he's a good man, he won't hurt you, he's a hobo. And I remember saying, what's a hobo? And Dad told me what a hobo was. And I said, I do remember saying, Daddy, I want to be a hobo. Because Dad told me that the hobos rode trains, and I could hear the old Rock Island whistles every day and every night, you know, and I always wished I was on one. And I told Dad I wanted to be a hobo. I do remember him saying, no, you don't ever want to be a hobo. Give me... This Mama Joe.
How can I stay out of the...
Mama Joe, Queen of Hobos. What year was that? That's
2003.
2003?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Where do you want me to hold it at?
She's going to be my music stand here. Right. But a brand new dance that's going around in the hobo jungle at the edge of town. Bindle duffel, dance all night with the hobo shuffle. The hobo shuffle gonna cause you pain. Flying right up like an old freight train. Get right out, shut your stuff. Dance all night with the hobo shuffle. With our new queen, Mama Joe, that's so long, can't dance no more. You dance so hard, up and puffle. Dance all night with the hobo shuffle. Give it a try, it ain't too tough. That's all that to the hobo shuffle. There's another queen, Gypsy Moon, help me write this tune. Her little dog and his waffle, waffle, waffle. It's all that to the hobo shuffle. Hobo shuffle will cause you pain. Flying right up like an old freight train. Give it a try, ain't too tough, tough. That's all that to the hobo shuffle.
The Maine stem was really just a vibrant commercial district where you had thousands, if not in some cases tens of thousands, of mainly white native-born men circulating in and out of this neighborhood, staying for a few days or weeks or maybe even months in the winter at a time before shipping out to the field to pursue another job. And virtually every institution, every building on the Maine stem catered to the hobo dollar. At the center of it all were the labor agencies, the places where the labor exchanged, the places where you would go and usually pay money to get information on a job, to get a position on a job somewhere, whether it be harvesting wheat in the Dakotas or working on a railroad maintenance project in Illinois, or maybe working in a copper mine somewhere. You would get information on the job. Often you would get your transportation to the job. And sometimes these places were called labor sharks by hobos because they extorted money. It seemed like they would demand $5 for a job that may pay, $2 a day or $2 every couple days for some labor there. But it was really the hobos went to the Maine stem to find out job information, number one. That's why they went there. They didn't just wander from job to job. They went from the job to the Maine stem, back to the job, back to the Maine stem. It wasn't really a circular pattern. It was back and forth. They spent part of their time in the country, in the hinterlands on a work site, and part of their time in the city. And it was in the city that these guys became known as homeless men. They were homeless in the city, they were hobos in the country. They were hobos on the road, they were homeless in the city. And homeless men had their own way about them, their own elan, their own the way they dressed. Every account from the time says, you could tell a homeless man like that just by the way he wore his hat, by the way he wore his collar open at the throat, by the way he jingled the money in his pockets, by the way he ducked into a gambling den or a whorehouse, always a saloon. Saloons were central before Prohibition. Saloons were central to life on the Maine stem because it was not only a place where a man got a drink, but it's where a man could cash a check. It's where a man could meet up with old friends. Often union meetings were held in saloons. Saloons doubled as labor exchanges. Often they had a room or two where hobos could stay. Saloons were central. No matter how big the Maine stem was, it always had to have a saloon, So in some of the smaller towns, the saloon might be, it might hold books. It might be a reading room. It might serve 4 or 5 different functions at one time. In a bigger Maine stems, the biggest in the country was Chicago's West Madison Street, where in the wintertime you could have 75,000 or even 100,000 homeless men sleeping in one night there. In the summertime, you'd get the population would dip down to maybe 30 or 40,000 because so many hobos were out in the field working. These places were just the Main stem in West Madison Street. The services were more subdivided. So you had purpose-built hotels for hobos. You had saloons that really functioned mainly just as saloons. You had labor exchanges. You had gambling parlors. You had cigar stores. You had reading rooms, which were often run by labor unions or by the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW. And so you had you had cafeterias, so you had a much more specialized and subdivided neighborhood. But every building and every Main stem really catered to the hobo dollar. And hobos had money. So they were homeless. And this is key. The key to understanding the hobo world in the early 20th century is that these men were considered homeless, not because they were poverty-stricken and penniless and they didn't have a place to stay. These guys had a place to stay. They had housing. They had cheap hotels and lodging houses. They had jobs. They were temporary jobs, to be sure, and they were seasonal jobs, but they had money from those jobs. They had their own subculture. They had their own language. They even had their own, they had their own jargon, and they had their own labor unions. They had their own organizations. But what they didn't have were nuclear family homes. They didn't have wives and children. They didn't live in the suburbs and what would become the mass suburbs. So they didn't have all the trappings of kind of middle-class life, and that's why they were considered homeless, and that's why they were considered a problem. There was a concern that white working-class Americans were not getting married, were not having children, and that the nation would become overwhelmed by immigrant groups, especially coming from Europe.
The hobos were actually invited here in Britt by the locals because they needed farm help. And at the end of the harvest, they had the hobo convention, the very first hobo convention. They had gotten their help, and the townspeople threw a big feast. And it became our very first hobo convention, and it's been going on now for 105 years. Of course, with modern technology, they no longer need our services, so we still gather here and we still reunite as a family, and it's the most rewarding experience of our entire year,
This is the 100th anniversary of the Wobblies. I've been saying this. The Wobblies organized amongst the hobos 100 years ago, and they wrote a lot of good songs. We're going to sing some of them tomorrow. One of their greatest songwriters was Joe Hill, and this is also the 90th anniversary of his execution. He was executed by a firing squad in the state of Utah, November the 19th of 1915. So we're memorializing that 90th anniversary. So I would like to sing for you the great song that was written about Joe Hill, who, it was commonly thought that he had been framed on this murder charge and executed because he was trying to organize amongst the miners out there. They organized the Wobblies, amongst the timber beasts and the people that did the wheat harvest and the apple knockers and all. They tried to get the hobos up to a decent standard of living. That's what the Big Bill Haywood would say. Anyway, it was thought Joe was framed. So the great poet Alfred Hayes wrote this poem about him and said it to me. I dreamt I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 90 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. In Salt Lake City, Joe, says I, him standing by my bed. They framed you on a murder charge, says Joe, but I ain't dead, says Joe, but I ain't dead. Them copper bosses killed you, Joe. They murdered you, says I. Takes more than guns to kill a man, says Joe. I did not die, says Joe. I did not die. And standing there as big as life and laughing with his eyes, what they forgot to kill, says Joe, went on to organize, went on to organize. From San Diego up to Maine, in every mine and mill, where workers fight for a better life, you'll always find Joe Hill. You'll always find Joe Hill. I dreamt I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 90 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. Thank you.
My sister, Connecticut Shorty, was Hobo Queen in 1992, and my other sister, New York Maggie, was Queen in 1994. They have done more. They've traveled by their camper, and they've been to every state around, from Hawaii all the way down through. There's no state they haven't visited. When they're visiting these states, they actually make sure they want to know, and people to understand what hobo is and everything else like that. They push the hobo to know that they are, even though they're out, they're retired, but they want everybody to know that that's what they enjoy. They enjoy being king and queen. They enjoy being queens of the hobos and all that. They worked their life, they retired, and they enjoy their free spirit, almost like my dad did riding the rails. Me, I still work, still do a regular job, but as of next year, I'm going to retire, and I'm going to travel more than I do. I come to Britain maybe every other year to visit my family, which are hobos, but we all get together, and they're my family, even if I'm not here. If something happened to me, my sister would say something happened to me, they would be the first one to help me out. Which Frog knows. Frog, after you talk to Frog later on, I believe he'll talk to you, he can tell you the things that the hobo family has done for him. The history of my dad was, he was a prince, and he never wanted to be, I guess he never wanted to be king. They said that he has to be voted as king, you put your name on a ballot, on a board, and then you go up and you make a 2 minutes, 5 minute, is it a 5 minute speech? 2 minute speech, and you've got to say why you want to be king. My dad always seemed to disappear when it came time to be going up for his speech. Me, I guess I got to get the gab, he didn't, I don't know. But when it came time for that, but they voted him Prince of the Hobos because of what he'd done for his family. He would always be there to help each other out, and that's the way it is.
Well, I know who the new queen is. Now we'll go to the election of the king. Same rules. They get a 2-minute speech, and afterwards we'll call each one back and you'll vote. Captain Dingo.
Boy, how did I get pulled out of this gene pool, you know? I'm coming to Britt for a good many years, I guess about 10 years now. I missed one. And I've tied 3 out of 4 elections, or 4 out of 5 or something over the period of time. I'm Captain Dingo, notoriously known as the Airborne Hobo, and I'm the Great Grand Duke of Bose out of Arizona. And I'd like to let you know that if I was the king of hobos, hey, I'm going to break all the rules. You know? Rules, 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 rules. First one I'll break on myself is probably Monday morning. I might go look for a job. You know? I love you all so very much, and I want to be a great ambassador, not only for the Hobo family, but for Britt and this little town where my grandmother grew up and moved to here from Denmark when she was a young child. And I'm very endeared that the veterans let me work with them on Friday mornings, even though yet it's been 35 years since I had a rifle in my hand and kept dropping it on my toe. But, you people out here are the most unique folks in the world. Not so much myself for being a bum and riding trains for 18 or 19 years and haven't even owned a car since 1986. But you folks are the unique ones, man, because you invite us here and let us share with you. And sharing with you gives me the fuel and the feed and the energy I need with my guitar as I travel around the country most of the year, and I can share that fine energy and that beautiful fuel from you folks and spread it around America, especially on the many military bases that I entertain on and things like that. And I don't really need a whole full 2 minutes. I think most of you folks know who I am. And I want to say I love each and every one of you, and ask God keep this town safe and keep me safe and my fellow friends up here. Well, I'm sorry I didn't wear a costume or anything like that to dress up for you, but I'm just a bum man who tries to stay out of trouble and play guitars for kids and veterans, and God bless every one of you.
Our next candidate is Dante Fuqua.
You got your watch? That's right. Okay, just making sure. Well, hello, Britt again. It's been fun coming here all these years. I surely appreciate the fact that I get to come here every year. I'm sad the day I leave, but I know a year later I can come right back here again and see everybody from all over the corners of the world and the earth, probably. They told me to be serious this time, like I'm supposed to really be serious, you know. There's a saying in there, like you're supposed to be brief, be sincere, and then be seated. And that was old Woodrow Wilson. But I decided that you don't have to be a character to have character. You have to be a character to have character. So I was thinking of my speech last year. That was the Good Nothing speech, if you remember it. This year I decided I would get up here and I would say something. So, something. Thank you very much.
Our next candidate is Green Card George.
Well, y'all know I'm the best drummer you ever get in Brit. I feel the tradition. This is my 7th year here, and I love all you people. Like, I feel so good right now. I'm a music fanatic, and I will answer every mail that everybody says. I live in Santa Cruz, California, and I'm the best musician you ever get in the world. Thank you.
Our last candidate is Iron Horse Brad.
I'm not much of a public speaker. My wife don't even let me speak privately. I get a word in now and then like, yes, ma'am. We all know why I'm up here. I'd like to be the king of the hobos. I got a lot of big shoes to fill, which I doubt that I can do. There was a lady right over here that I was talking to earlier. She asked me, if you make king of the hobo, what are you going to do? So I told her what I've been doing. Now I will support all hobos as much as I can, and I'll try to publicize the hobos. But for the last 5 years, I've been going to elementary schools, and I've been putting on shows like with play the guitar and sing. They don't know I can't sing. They're young. But I play the guitar and sing. I show them different hobo crafts and things like that, and some pictures of the old hobos. And I'd always try to teach them the dangers of that. I try to talk them in not being like me, not being like all of us. It's dangerous. It really is dangerous. And I'll tell all the kids right now it's dangerous. So we all know why I'm here, and that's all I got to say. Now, thank you very much.
Now it's time to vote. And now for our new queen of the hobos, Half Track.
Thank you all. I will do my best to be an ambassador to the Brit and to my hobo family because I love you all.
And our new king, Iron Horse Brad.
Thank you all very, very much.
Yeah, that's good. I gotta find my guitar pick. I got my pockets full of change in anticipation for the Queen's Drive. I'll just do it without.
I lip sync. Thanks.
This is a song for all the good people, all the good people who touched up my life. This is a song for all the good people, people I'm thanking my God for tonight. This is a song for all the good people, all the good people who touched up my life. This is a song for all the good people, people I'm thanking my God for tonight. This is a song for all the good people who know what I needed was something they had, well, food on the table, a heart that was able able to keep me just this side of sad. This is a song for all the good people, all the good people who touched up my life. This is a song for all the good people, people I'm thanking my God for tonight. This is a song for all the good travelers who passed through my life as they moved along. The hobos, the tinkers, the poets and thinkers each took the time to sing me their song. Okay, everybody, this is a song for all the good people, all the good people who touched up my life. This is a song for all the good people, people I'm thanking my God for tonight. Thank you. It's been an honor to be the king of the hobos. Thank you so much.
I think we are making a lot of the same mistakes that have been made in the past. I think we as a society tend to judge before we know. I think we tend to project our own fears and concerns and, buried dreams maybe and fantasies on to those who seem different or unfamiliar to us. I think we tend not to want to take the time to understand people who are in severely deprived or subordinate situations in society, like the homeless. And those are mistakes, I think, that we made 100, 120 years ago. They're mistakes we still make today. I also think we're making a grievous mistake in using housing policy to try and shape family relationships. I think that is a big mistake that we made in the early 20th century, and it's one that continues to haunt us. I think we're almost using housing as a weapon, giving it to people who conform to the family arrangements that are favored by the state, and withholding housing from those who refuse to conform. And I think that's a big mistake. I think housing needs to become considered a right, available to everybody, regardless of their sins or their vices. And every study actually shows that all the sins and vices that are often connected with poverty and homelessness, such as drug addiction, alcohol addiction, even mental illness, diminish when people are given stable housing. I think ideas like creating a national housing trust, where money is set aside to make low-cost housing available, are a great idea. I think there are 1,001 great ideas about solving the housing crisis in America, but the first step is to recognize that it is a housing crisis, that it is a housing problem, that it isn't a problem of character, it's not a problem of personality flaws, it's not a problem of drug addiction or alcoholism, it's a problem of housing. Housing first is, I think, a slogan and a powerful one, and it's one that I think ought to drive our response to the homelessness today.
in the old town downtown tonight. Here comes Mayor Nelson, yeah, he's our man. He makes the town go, he's got a plan. Hey, there's Linda Hughes, the old museum's grand. She says in the empty lot, a new one will stand. Down in the jungle, the campfire glows, lighting the old boxcar, its legend grows. There are many tales and stories that are told by traveling folks with monikers, the old hobos. Hot time in the old town, downtown tonight. Hot time in the old town tonight. Hot time in the old town, downtown tonight. Hot time in the old town, downtown tonight. Downtown in Bridge, they're boiling mulligan stew. Come share the brew, do have a bowl or two. Then we'll cast our load by the old Gazy foam. Then a coronation of a king and queen oboe. Hot time in the old town, downtown tonight. Hot time in the old town tonight. Hot time in the old town, downtown tonight. Hot time in the old town, downtown tonight. Hey, there's that man in Steam Train, Mad and Slim Tim too. Mad Mary, Lady Nightingale, Tanner, Virginia Slim, Grandpa Dudley, Redbird Express, Spike Shorty and Slow Freight, and all of the rest. Hot time in the old town, downtown tonight. Hot time in the old town tonight. Hot time in the old town, downtown tonight. Hot time in the old town, downtown tonight. Yeah, I'm heading out to Bridge Highway. Big doings in town, they're having hobo days. We'll be singing the old song to